This section is all about views and the Razor syntax that we will use to create our user interfaces. First, we will get to know the views a bit better. We have created complex views in the last sections without being formally introduced to them due to the fact that views are very interconnected with models and controllers. This section will look into views from a more formal perspective. Views are fun and simple. They are basically HTML creating machines that spew out HTML user interface code with the power of C# right in the views. Let's see them in action. You have already seen that views are the host of user interface or HTML code. They can also have some C# code to make it more dynamic. There is model that can be passed to them and which can be accessed from the views and use the data to make user interface meaningful. View is the third pillar of MVC. We have a controller which regulates the data fetching and responding with appropriate code for an incoming request. We have model which gets data from a data store and then presents it to the controller, and the controller then sends that data as a response or sends it to a view, and then the view makes an HTML response using the data that was provided by the controller and plugging them in the correct place. A view is responsible for the presentation of dynamic data. Without the views, the HTML will be static and the data obtained by the model will be abortive and meaningless. Codes to make appropriate presentation are laid out in views. User interface is a separate thing altogether. It requires HTML, CSS, JavaScript, etc. It is a separate layer known as the presentation layer. Views help separate that layer from the rest of the code. Views don't care what the request type is or who is asking for it. It doesn't know anything about how data is coming to it and where it is coming from. The only thing it knows is that there will be a particular type of data that will be passed to it, and it will use that data type to make the presentation and creation of UI. You can either use ASP or Razor syntax. We will talk about Razor later in this section. In this course, we will not be using the ASP style of syntax. Rather, we will be using the newer Razor syntax. All views should reside in the views folder created at the root level. Like controller and models, views get its own folder. It is important to name it views and to put it at the root level. The MVC framework will look in those places like ~/views or ~/views/shared folders. And if it can't find either the folder or the view in those folders, it will throw an exception. By convention, when a view is created, a folder with the same name as the controller is created, and all the views that belong to that controller is placed in that folder for organizational purposes, assuming that the folder already didn't exist. Here, the home controller's action methods have their corresponding views, like the index view or the details view, in the home folder. By convention, a view has the .cs HTML extension. Layout.cs HTML is like a master page. All CSS and JavaScript file references can be put inside the _layout.cs HTML. We will see in a future video how to do this. A shared folder has all the views that are common across the application. _view import is used for add tag helper. Using statements can be added here, like the following statement. This helps us simply declare the model classes in our views without the fully qualified namespace. _viewStart.cs HTML has the layout reference. That means, unless otherwise specified, the _layout.cs HTML is the default view for the whole site in this example. A partial view is just like a view, but if a view has too many sections, it may be broken down into smaller and more manageable piece of code. Code that may be reused across multiple pages should be in a partial view. For better organization and management, partial views are used to unclutter a view by breaking down the view into smaller and logical sections. Can be under shared folder if the partial view will be used site-wide. Here, the example of footer and the header are used site-wide, so they were placed in the shared folder. Or it can be in the same folder if the view is not going to be used more than one page, like the carousel view. Can receive a strongly typed model like a normal view. It is rendered by using @html.partial, and inside, within double quote, you put the name of the partial view with optional model that you can pass after a comma.